Abby Tai, welcome to the Hair Like Hers podcast. It's so great to have you. Eczema conquerors.
Yes, thank you for having me, Shab.
It's so interesting because your name is so perfectly indicative of how conquering eczema is such a feat because of how crippling it can obviously be. And the reason I was excited to have you on the show is because I didn't just want to speak to a skin expert or like a derm. I wanted to have someone who's tackling this from a nutritional standpoint because I personally suffered from this. And I wholeheartedly believe that nutrition is the answer to most everything. So this is why we're talking all things eczema. And I have you as a registered holistic nutritionist on and not just a derm. So,
And I really appreciate that. Thank you. I hope that I'm able to give a well rounded approach and help your listeners out there as well.
yeah, without a doubt. And let's just get this out of the way right now. How do you pronounce it?
So I know there are different ways. I pronounce it as eczema.
And I say eczema. So how are we going to do this?
I think we can keep it the way it is.
Okay.
There are definitely a lot of people out there who pronounce it differently. I know a lot of people in Canada tend to say eczema, and a lot of Americans tend to say eczema. But I've also heard people from both places pronounce it as both. So I think it works both
Okay.
ways.
All right. As long as the listeners don't mind that we're going to be kind of going back and forth between the two different pronunciations. Okay. So Abby, give us a little bit of a background and talk about how you came to specialize in this skin condition.
Yeah, sure. So I had suffered from eczema really, really severely. I always had it as a baby, and my mom always said that it was manageable, it was very mild. But it wasn't until I was a teenager when it was really, really severe. It actually first flared up when my first boyfriend broke up with me. And so I remember it was my first love and I just got dumped and my heart just broke and shattered into a million pieces. And that's when I feel
Nobody
like
forgets nobody forgets the first heartbreak.
I know the first love. And so I remember I just erupted in skin flares and I was upset at the world, upset at him, upset at myself. And I think I turned all that hatred and rejection and frustration into a lot of anger on the skin. That's when the very severe eczema started. And I always thought of it as a death sentence because it was so severe to the point where it hurt to walk. I was pretty much like 95% covered in rashes, except for maybe like my nose and my bottom of my feet. And everything hurt. It hurt to walk. It hurt to shower. It hurt to, go to school and everything hurt. I was afraid to see people, afraid of their judgments. And I became very depressed and suicidal. And yeah, I just felt like it took away so much of my life and it robbed so much of my childhood. And I remember thinking that if I ever healed from this, I would make it my mission to share with the world how to heal from eczema and how to conquer it so that no one would ever have to live the way that I did. And so that what made me decide to go on this route to really specialize in it and to help others who are going through the same thing because I know what it's like to suffer really badly from it, and it hurts physically, mentally. And my goal in life is to help others who are going through this so that they will never have to go through a day where they are feeling the same way, where they feel like it's robbed their life.
I can speak to experiencing this because I did not have it by any means anywhere near the severity that you had. And I cannot imagine what that was like at such a young age. And for it to just come on so full force, because I had a very mild bit of eczema that I experienced a few years ago. And it just kind of started just in like a few places, just like uncontrollable itchiness, but it was like a manageable rash and it would flare up and down. And so I could like handle it. But even that in itself affected, my relationship and affected my confidence. And I was just uncomfortable. And so you're constantly thinking of like, is this going to flare up? And what kind of bad timing is it going to have today, and how's it going to interfere with everything. So I just, my heart totally goes out to you. And today we're not just talking about eczema for the body, but we're obviously going to focus on the scalp, because the majority of scalp concerns are due to improper or infrequent washing. So that's like the first thing, right? If somebody has a scalp that's acting out, it's typically majority of the time an insufficiently washing type of issue. After that, it's environmentally related. So if we're talking about like extreme cold or warm weather or dry weather, these kinds of conditions can affect your scalp and make it really act out. And then finally, the third most popular cause of scalp conditions is food related. So any kind of changes in your diet can affect your oil production and thus either dry you out or make you excessively oily. And if that's gone untreated for a long period of time, that's when you're going to start to have some long-term hair growth issues and hair loss issues. And I'm sure skin issues like eczema go misdiagnosed like scalp conditions all the time because people don't know if they have dry scalp, oily scalp, dandruff, or whatnot. It's just like I have flakes and I don't really know what it means. And I would love to, for that reason, clarify exactly what eczema is and how you can identify it. Because I bet there are people out there that aren't even aware if they have it or maybe mistreating it, whatever scalp or skin issue it is that they have. So, Abby, tell us, let's start from like the fundamentals. What exactly is eczema by definition, and how can one identify it? Like, where is it located? What does it look like? What does it feel? The symptoms?
Yeah, so there are different types of eczema out there, and they can be located in different parts of the body. For myself and a lot of people that I know, we've had it a lot on our face, and but it can be anywhere. It can be on the crease of the elbows, on the back of the knees, on the feet. But specifically today, I know we want to focus on the scalp. So the scalp is also a popular place where it can be. One of the biggest symptoms that people experience is flakiness, dryness, itchiness, and it can also be red, and there can also be rashes. A lot of times it's uncomfortable. A lot of people can start to pick at their skin as well. In particular, when you notice that it's on your scalp, it's what we call seborrheic dermatitis. So seborrheic dermatitis can be found on the scalp, but it can also be found on the face as well. So around the eyebrows, around the nose, and also around the mouth area too. So that's also where it can be found. And for myself, I actually had really bad seborrheic dermatitis in the past. I remember I would be oozing and I would also have huge flakes of skin coming off. So that's what some people with seborrheic dermatitis also experience, is not just the flakiness, but sometimes you'll see the dandruff come off, you'll see it on the shirt, especially if you're wearing a dark colored shirt. And I had a very serious, severe case of it. And so I just remember being able to pull flakes the size of a coin off of my scalp. And that was just so traumatic, but that's what a severe case would look like.
Did you have that flare up when you had your very first eczema experience? So back when you were really young and you said it was all over your body, did it also affect your scalp at that moment?
Yes, it did. It did. And then also subsequent times when I was older as well, I had periods where it would come on and off again. For example, times when I was dating my boyfriend, who's now my husband, I had a few flare ups too. And it wasn't as severe on my scalp, but I do remember always dealing with dandruff and dealing with white flakes that were just on my scalp or on my shirt. So there definitely were times where it felt embarrassing as well.
Yeah, yeah, without a doubt. And is it common for somebody to have it on their body, but not on their scalp? Because I've never had it on my scalp. And I do pay a lot of attention to my scalp through scrubs and like, exfoliants, chemical and physical exfoliants and all that. So I just constantly give it so much attention. But but can it be that you could just have it on your body and not on your scalp? Because my flare-ups were in certain areas on my body. Is that normal, or is it always, a kind of full body experience?
Yeah, so definitely it can just be on the body as well. It can be localized. Some people only have it localized to their hands. Some people have it localized to their arms where it's not on the scalp as well. And that's actually pretty lucky for people who have that, because it's always hard dealing with seborrheic dermatitis help too.
Yeah. And so, what are the different types of like different forms of it in terms of the duration or the frequency? So, just to give people the clearest idea that we possibly can about it, because like if somebody might have a certain kind of skin issue or a rash and they might not know what exactly it is this something that you're dealing with constantly? Is it something that comes and goes? Is it just flare up? How long can you deal with it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I would say there's a lot of different ranges of severity and duration. So there's all the way from mild cases to very, very severe. And we work all the way from mild to severe. But a lot of times we see a lot of severe cases. So if it's very mild, I've seen people just be who have just been able to, they might use like a natural product like zinc oxide or shea butter, or even maybe like a short round of steroids and it'll go away, and that might just be localized to, for example, like the hands, the legs, or on the elbow crease, for example. And it tends to go away quickly, whereas some people have a more severe case that doesn't seem to go away. It just feels more stubborn. It can last weeks to months, or it might even be seasonal, where it tends to go away in the summer and come back in the winter, which we can also talk about seborrheic dermatitis being more prominent in winter, especially because there's lack of sun. And sun can actually help with our skin and help with the eczema as well. And then we also see very severe cases. It's covering so many parts of the body, like I had, for example. It really ranges in duration, and there's different ways that we can tackle it and conquer it.
What
But
is the Abby, what does the sun have to do with it? Why would sebderm flare up during the winter months because of lack of sun?
yeah, so it's really interesting. So, just for some background, whenever in the States specifically, when there's more sunlight, there's actually a 20 to 30% reduction in the prevalence of eczema. The northern part of the states compared to the southern parts of the states actually has a different prevalence of eczema. So the southern parts tend to have more sun, more humidity, more UV. And so there's actually a 20 to 30% reduction in the prevalence of eczema. And one reason is because the sun has the ability to kill off some of the cells in on the skin that are responsible for the itching and the inflammation as well. But also, the sun is responsible for creating vitamin D. And because it helps to create vitamin D, we know that vitamin D helps boost the immune system, but it's also linked to less severity of eczema as well. Yeah.
I never knew that, and yet I always knew that when my eczema was really bad on my body, that I needed to just go to the beach.
Yes.
It's just like my
And I
body
think
knew.
also, yeah, and there's something calming about being near the beach. It's very relaxing and something about it. And
So
also, areas of precipitation can tend to increase the prevalence of eczema by about 30% as well.
interesting. So
Yeah.
higher precipitation, higher increase in
Yeah,
eczema.
and also where there's more air pollution, and also in urban cities, there also tends to be a higher prevalence as well.
Well, I moved to New York City 10 years ago from Toronto, right? Because we're both Canadian. And I never had any kind of eczema, any kind of symptom like that whatsoever before until I moved to New York. And this is definitely such a congested, polluted city. There's no way around it. And it started flaring up about, so 6 years in, 6 years after I had moved here. So 4 years ago now, it started acting up. And I would only imagine like it must be, and we'll get into this, right? Reasons why we get it. It's just an
Yeah.
accumulation of so much around us. Let's talk about that. Let's jump into what causes these outbreaks, whether it be on the scalp or the body. What is causing this eczema?
Yeah. So let's talk about seborrheic dermatitis specifically. So one of the big reasons why seborrheic dermatitis happens is actually due to an overgrowth of a yeast called Malassezia. And this yeast actually feeds on the sebum on the skin. And so that's what can cause it to eat up a lot of the oils on our skin, and it can cause that dryness to happen, that flakiness to happen. And so we usually have a normal amount of yeast on our scalp and even on our face area. But when there is an overgrowth, this is when our skin can start to get out of balance and the skin pH levels can get out of balance as well. And so because of this can cause those flare ups and this can cause the dryness, the redness that you see.
And so what causes the actual like overgrowth of the yeast? Do we know what's causing that?
Yeah, so that's something that we want to get into. So one of the links that can cause this is candida, another yeast as well. So there have been some links with candida in the body. And so a lot of doctors tend to just look topically whenever we try to fix the skin. So it's what we call a band-aid solution in some cases because we are only treating or they are only treating the skin topically, usually with steroids, medications, maybe some anti-dandruff shampoo, which can work in some cases as well. But when it's really stubborn, we find that we really have to look deeper into the root cause, and that's what I find is the number one complaint of a lot of eczema sufferers is that doctors are just giving them medication after medication, and they're just so tired of it. They want something that will actually get to the root cause of what's causing their skin to flare up. Did you want me to go into the root causes?
Absolutely. Let's definitely get there because I think that I think people need to understand where it all comes from. And I think that with that understanding, they'll be able to really kind of shift their focus and know what they're trying to target exactly.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's so important. And that's why I love your platform. It's here to share with people what we can do to help the scalp get better, help the skin get better as well. And so I really love talking about this topic as well because it's a passion of mine and I've suffered from it for so long. And so there can be up to 15 to 16 different root causes that not a lot of doctors talk about. And they can range from anything like overgrowth of bacteria to fungal overgrowth, yeast overgrowth, even heavy metals, parasites. We see a lot too. Underactive adrenals, especially if someone's under a lot of stress or they've used steroids for a while. Even if you have an underactive thyroid, it can throw your skin out of balance as well. Even things like mold and nutrient deficiencies. So you can start to see how there's a lot of layers to this, and it's not just about looking at the symptoms because the skin is just a symptom of what's happening. And when it's on the scalp, it's also just the symptom of what's happening, but it's not really getting to the root of why it's happening. It's like looking at an iceberg where you only see the ice at the top, which is the symptom that's happening, but we don't see everything below it that's causing it to happen. And so I think that a lot of us are missing this piece of the puzzle and we're missing actually looking at the bottom and looking at the root cause and looking deeper to investigate and see why it's happening and what these root causes could be because they're unique for every person. Not everyone has the same root cause. And so sometimes when there's a lot of diet recommendations out there, eczema recipe books for people, they can't always apply to every single person and we really want to make it individualized for because you're unique and no one is the same as you.
So let's talk about that journey to recovery. What does that look like? And if you specifically are, speaking to somebody that's got their own kind of symptoms. So for instance, let's take me for example, how I had and I still get flare-ups here and there. And that's the funny thing, right? Like I had it, it was a little bit more severe and then got to the bottom of it somewhat. And now I get the occasional flare up, which makes me think, okay, am I under a lot of stress? Is there some kind of inflammation happening in my body? What's causing this flare up? Because I'm almost grateful for symptoms like that because I stop and think like, okay, my body is talking to me, just like somebody with any type of like sudden hair loss, like an alopecia areata or a diffuse type of alopecia can stop and think like, why did this shift just happen? Why am I experiencing this symptom? And it allows you to just stop and think about what's changed in your life. And so when I have the flare ups, I'm immediately like, okay, what did I just drink? What did I just eat? What did happen? Let me make this connection because, like, who better than yourself to keep track of these things, right? So if I came to you and I said, I'm having these flare ups, are occasionally happening once in a while. I get, and just so everyone understands, like what my eczema flare up is like. So it's around my the inside of like my elbows here, and it'll get really itchy and it'll just, my skin will start burning. It's like a burning sensation. And so, what would you do to help me on my journey to recovery? What would that look like?
Yeah. So our first goal is completely opposite of what doctors would do. So yes, we would still look at what it looks like, which is what conventional doctors do, but we would also want to look internally. And so we would want to do some type of testing or online assessment to figure out what's happening. So we can do some gut testing, which can include stool tests. So that can give us an idea of what's happening. We know that 70 to 80% of the immune system is located in the gut. And so we want to take a look at what pathogens are in your gut, whether there's overgrowth of bacteria, fungal issues, yeast issues, and also the health of your gut microbiome. How diverse the bacteria is, the more diverse, the better. And we want to make sure that your gut is looking good. And most of the time, when people come to see us, their skin is not in great shape. And when we do the stool test for them, we can see a lot of overgrowth of bacteria and leaky gut. So we're able to identify things like that. But we also take a really in depth look at what's happening inside your body and also what your lifestyle is like. So we look at even things like how you're born, whether through C-section or natural birth, because that affects your gut microbiome and your immunity today. Most of the people we work with, I've found a pattern that they have been breastfed for less than 3 to 6 months. And we know that that's a big building block for helping to establish your immune system and your gut microbiome as well. So we tend to see that pattern. Another thing that we look into are whether you have any dental issues, because dental issues are linked to skin flare ups. 45% of your oral bacteria actually overlaps with your gut bacteria. And so there's a huge overlap in that area. But
Wait, can you say
that
that
we
one
can
more
look,
time? Sorry, Abby, can you say that one more time?
yeah,
Your oral and your gut bacteria?
sure. So 45% of your oral bacteria overlaps with your gut bacteria.
And
So
so what
that
does that
means that
mean? Yeah.
that means that if your mouth is not in great shape, if there's a lot of bacteria, if you need a lot of fillings, if you need root canals, or if you have dead teeth in your mouth, which can also stem from root canals, that can affect the rest of your body. And whenever there's an infection in your tooth or there's bacteria in your tooth, it doesn't just stay there, but it can travel around your body as well. It can travel into your bloodstream. And so I've met with biological dentists and I've interviewed some of them where they have shared that just by removing a root canal or even an infected tooth, they're able to see their patient's skin clear up. And so there's a big link in that area.
Wow, that is just something you would never think of making the connection to.
And that's why I love just taking a holistic approach because I feel like doctors are only looking at it from a topical point of view when there's so much to look at internally.
Right. Yeah, hence why you're a holistic nutritionist. Like, we need more people looking at the broader view and not looking at the body in this like compartmentalized type of approach, but rather as a whole and how everything is so connected. That's just so fascinating. And also just goes to show like how connected the body is. One issue in your mouth can wreak havoc all over your skin. That's just so
Yeah,
powerful. And
exactly.
all the more reason
Yeah.
to take care of every element. I do a lot of work to like help my gut. I always have. And it's like, no wonder I had like certain skin issues, but I'm in a really great place today. Thank goodness. But what would be your number one tip for gut health outside of probiotics? What's one thing that's like had the biggest impact on you and your microbiome and gut condition?
Yeah, that's so good. And I feel like it's so hard to pinpoint just one thing. I feel like
Right.
because I did so many things, but I would say getting rid of the bad bugs and adding in more good ones.
Mhm.
So, taking a good probiotic. But also once we did the assessments to figure out what's happened in my body, just making sure that we got rid of underlying pathogens and bacteria because if those overgrow, it can also affect the rest of your skin.
Right. So I guess it doesn't matter what you're putting in if you're not getting rid of the bad bacteria
Yeah.
on the inside.
And that's why we also find that some people have what they call a perfect diet, perfect lifestyle, but they're still flaring up because there's something internally that they haven't gotten to the root yet.
Right. And you would like clear that up through a detox or
Yeah, so there's different ways and there's different steps. For example, we want to make sure that a person's elimination channels are open. We want to make sure that they're able to sweat properly, that they're having frequent bowel movements and not constipated. Because if they're not going regularly, then the toxins are recycling back into the body. We want to make sure that they're drinking a lot of water, and we want to make sure that these elimination channels are open, even their lymphatic system. What we find is that we have a lot of clients who are going through eczema and even something called topical steroid withdrawal, which is where they've used steroids for a while or even a long time. And once they come off of it, they're starting to get a rebound where they flared up even more than they previously did.
Yeah.
And so,
And
yeah,
so we're talking about topicals like cortisone, right?
yes, yes, exactly. So we see a lot of people who are going through that, and their lymphatic systems are very congested. They have a lot of swollen lymph.
Is that because of the continued use of these topical steroids that their lymphatic system is so backed up?
That and also it causes a lot of other imbalances in the body, like adrenal fatigue, because their adrenals became so dependent on it, and it
Yeah.
tends to mess the body up and it causes a lot of imbalances in a lot of ways.
I have been using cortisone for years now. I literally cannot stop using it. It definitely helps manage my flare ups. So, and I have, I think, let's say like I ran out of it and I had to wait for like my next tube to come in, and it would have been maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks, or if I was away and for whatever reason I didn't have it because you know, when you depend on it, you make sure you have that in stock. God forbid I didn't
Yeah,
have it with
definitely.
me. What and when I did stop it, it was pretty brutal. So you're saying that that withdrawal actually is resulting in something worse than originally. So what does one do? How does one actually get off of the topical steroids? Because it's a medication after all. If it is actually affecting the adrenals and it's getting in the way of our detox kind of pathways and all that, let's talk about this because I would love to get off of cortisone.
Sure. Yeah. So we never want to get off of it cold turkey, and we want to slowly wean off of it. And we don't want to cause the body any shock. And so the way that we personally do it is that while we're weaning off of it, we usually get a person on a protocol, meaning that we've done some assessments, either the gut testing or done more assessments to figure out what's happening inside the body. So we have clues into what's actually causing their skin to flare. So, for example, let's say we find that it's fungal overgrowth or yeast overgrowth, and then there's some overgrowth of bacteria too. So, we want to make sure that we're addressing those. And then we also want to make sure that we are also supporting the adrenals, especially because they can be taxed if someone has used steroids for a long time. And then we want to make sure that the elimination channels and their drainage pathways are open as well so that they're ready to actually remove some of the imbalances from the body, remove some of the pathogens like the overgrowth of yeast or even the fungal overgrowth. We want to make sure that we're able to remove those from the body as well. And some people can get a detox reaction. Some people can get a healing crisis where it gets worse before it gets better. But we usually find that there's an improvement after that. And the important thing that we're addressing is that we're helping to balance the body back. And so while we are removing the steroids, we're slowly weaning off. And for our clients, they've actually been able to successfully wean off of it over time. And then their skin clears up, and we've seen them feel a lot better, get a lot brighter. They just start to have a smile on their faces because they start to have their life back again. As they remove the steroid and we get them on a protocol to balance things out, we start to see great changes happening.
So let's talk about what someone should avoid if they are experiencing any kind of eczema. What foods to avoid, maybe types of creams, body washes, like outside of resetting what's on the inside, what should one avoid?
Yeah. So, in particular for seborrheic dermatitis, because the overgrowth of yeast on the scalp and on the face is malassezia, one thing it does love to feed on and love to eat are oils. And so, it just loves oils. And so, whenever people give recommendations to oil cleanse or to just put, like, for example, coconut oil on your face or olive oil has been shown to break down the skin barrier, by the way. So it's not an oil we typically recommend.
Wow.
Yeah, but even things like coconut oil, it's something that can feed the malassezia because it does love the oil. And so one thing that we want to add in are antifungals. And so just adding some natural antifungals can help. So, for example, things like tea tree oil can help, rosemary hydrosol that can help too, just adding that on the scalp too. Also, things like neem oil can be helpful too. So, basically, adding in antifung to help kill some of that overgrowth of yeast.
And what's
But
your recommendation for how to apply these specific
yeah,
antifungals? Because they're they're like essential oils, right? And so you don't want to apply it directly. How do you recommend
yeah.
applying
So
that?
the best way is to dilute it in a carrier oil. If you apply it, you never want to apply essential oils directly to your skin, especially because it can develop sensitivities later on as well. Even if you don't notice that even if you feel like you haven't reacted to it when you apply it, but you
Yeah.
still want to use a carrier oil. So yeah, you could just dilute it in a carrier oil. One that's really good actually is jojoba oil because it's more of a waxy ester rather than an actual oil. So jojoba oil would actually be okay to apply to the skin. And for example, if you're using like a hydrosol, that would just be a spray. So you could just spray your skin and your scalp. Another one is apple cider vinegar as well. You could dilute 1 to 1 in water, 1 part apple cider vinegar. The only downside is that it can sting. But the great thing about the hydrosol and the apple cider vinegar is that we are actually helping to lower the pH of the skin because what can happen is that when there's severe eczema, what's happening is that often the skin is very alkaline and we don't want the skin to be very alkaline. We want it to be more acidic. And the more acidic that it is, the more that we can protect our acid mantle, the more that we can keep certain bacteria out. And so by whenever we come out of the shower, by putting hydrosols or even apple cider vinegar or even aloe vera, by putting that on our skin will help to reacidify the acid mantle. And it's also shown that there's less inflammation when the acid mantle when our skin barrier is more acidic. And inflammation is higher when when our skin barrier is more alkaline.
Okay, so that makes sense. So that's topically like how you can balance out your pH, but that's and so that would be like a temporary solution, right? Because ultimately, if you're managing the bacteria or any kind of fungus internally, then you're not even going to deal with it coming out of the skin, right? Like, do I have that correctly?
So you're saying if we're managing it internally, do we still have to apply the things topically?
Yeah.
The reason for applying things topically is that people do find that it helps to bring relief
Hmm.
in the meantime because internal solutions can take some time. Internal solutions, for some people, it can take months and it can take a really long time.
Got it.
So by applying something topically in the meantime, we're also helping to bring relief for that person. So even anti-dandruff shampoos can help at times as well. I've heard of some doctors recommending it for the face too. So I've seen for recommendations, but some ingredients that you can look for in shampoos are ingredients like zinc pyrithione. That's very good for the scalp and very good for seborrheic dermatitis. One brand is Happy Cappy, and that one is good for both adults and children as well. But there's also other ingredients like salicylic acid. And I know Avalon has one. And I think there's some other companies that have one as well.
Yeah, there's
That's
an
also an
amazing
excellent.
there's actually a salicylic acid scalp exfoliating treatment by the Inky List, which is this UK
Oh, awesome.
skincare and now scalp care brand where they have pure salicylic acid just for the scalp. And it's really good for breaking down buildup and any kind of like overlapping kind of flaking, something more intense on the scalp. It's really, really, really gentle, but amazing for helping clear out the scalp.
That's great. Yeah, I love that you shared that.
What are some other things that people should avoid at home? So what should you not put on your skin?
Like I mentioned earlier, you want to avoid those oils because the oils are what the malassezia feed on. You want to avoid ingredients where, there's too many harsh preservatives or chemicals or even products with a lot of fragrance. Fragrances are something that we want to avoid as well, especially because we know that it can be a hidden trade secret name for hidden ingredients that are used that don't have to be disclosed. So that can irritate the skin. So those are definitely ingredients that we would want to avoid.
And then aside from products to apply topically or to avoid and ingredients, is there anything else that somebody should avoid, like lifestyle wise, to help them kind of manage the eczema?
Yeah, actually, I also wanted to point out that if you are experiencing seborrheic dermatitis specifically on the scalp and on the face, you'll also want to avoid products with yeast as well. So, nutritional yeast, kombucha, unfortunately, and just certain breads, especially gluten and dairy, are very inflammatory products, even though they taste.
Oh, you mean like to not ingest?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Mhm. Yeah. So topics are internally, we want to avoid any inflammatory foods that can be causing the skin to flare.
So is that like fermented food?
Yeah.
Okay.
So kombucha is high on the list, but fermented foods for some people it can cause high histamine, and so they can actually flare up to after eating it. And so the best way is you can either keep a food journal and monitor how you feel after eating fermented foods to see if your body can actually tolerate it.
So you're saying kombucha has a high intolerance.
That and also because it's made with yeast, and
Yeah.
so it can cause that flare up for some people.
Got it. Okay. Because I was going to say, like, I love fermented food.
I know they're
Like
delicious.
sauerkraut and kimchi. I try to put that on absolutely everything. And I know it's good. It's like, it's good for my gut. It works great for me. The more I eat that, the better. Like everything is just so much
For
better.
sure.
And
Yeah.
something really interesting too, like you were talking about detox pathways, and let's just chat about this for a second because this was major for my life. I, so just so you know, Abby, like background, I've mentioned this several times before in the show. I have always dealt with some form of acne or whether it was cystic or just like random breakouts, whatever. It's constantly like struggling with this kind of skin issue. And I've mostly managed that because I've been working on my detox pathways, right? So much work that I've done with my integrative specialists. And the number one thing that I noticed immediately after the years of working on a program and trying to help my body detox better, I started to sweat. I would work out and do like a hot yoga class, and the person next to me would be dripping in sweat, and I wouldn't even have a single drop. And I was just always like, I never really made anything of it. No one really understood what that meant. And I would just say, oh, well, I just don't sweat, which is now I know is not a good thing, right? Your body obviously like can't get rid of what it needs
Yes,
to.
exactly.
And so today, proud to say that when I do hot yoga, I sweat so much.
Amazing.
And I remember the first time I actually noticed it, I had never experienced anything like that, and I was so happy because I knew what it meant, because I knew my body was getting rid of toxins, which, like, we don't wanna hang on to, and so I always wondered, like, what the heck was my body doing with this before?
Yes, we actually see that a lot. A lot of our eczema clients are not able to sweat properly. And actually, the same thing happened to me as well. It was only until I started working internally in my body where the same thing as you, I was finally able to sweat and I was so happy. So I feel you and what you've gone through.
I never thought I would say that in my entire life, like, "Wow, I'm so happy to be sweating," but it is so indicative of a sign of health and, things moving properly through your body. So, okay, so let's talk about some of your products. Why don't you talk about what it is that you recommend and your line of products and what you've created?
Yeah, sure. So my line of products is called Conqueror Skincare. One reason for calling it Conqueror Skincare is because I truly believe that we are more than conquerors. Actually, even my website is Eczema Conquerors. And so I believe that whenever people use the product, that I want it to be a reminder to them that you are able to conquer anything that comes your way. And, my whole life I felt really discouraged and defeated, and I never found information to help. And so my goal is just to lift people up and encourage them that you can get through this and that you don't have to suffer this way forever. And so that's my reminder to each person. And so we have a skin balm, we have a bath soak product, and also a body wash. And I personally used all three and I still use them whenever I have a bad flare or I just use it in general. I use the balm as a moisturizer and also on any eczema spots. But for the bath soak, there were times where I mentioned earlier about how there were days where it was just so hard to move and walk. And there were times I felt like a disabled person. Even after I gave birth to my kids, I flared up really, really badly. And so just soaking in the bath soaps really helped. I would even soak my scalp and my whole face because I was just suffering from the flare up so severely. And, putting on clothes would hurt, and even going outside would hurt. And my face was all red. And I remember my naturopath saying that it once took him 2 months just to see what my normal face looked like. And so these products gave me relief. And even the body wash, you can use it on your scalp as a shampoo. That's what we've had some people do as well. And they've really liked it. And so the bath soak also helps to soften the skin, helps to bring down the inflammation. And all the products are all natural because my expectations are high because I used to use a lot of products that had harsh preservatives and ingredients in them. So my goal is to make it safe for people and also to help bring relief.
Well, I know that I have a package coming my way, so I can't wait to try them out. It sounds so good. What is it? Can I ask, what's the main ingredient in the skin balm?
Yeah, so actually it's a mixture of ingredients. I like to call it the 15 superfood ingredients in it. So there are a few essential oils, some that I mentioned on this episode. So there's ingredients like neem oil and tea tree oil, which are all antifungal,
Right.
antibacterial as well. There's also some vitamin E in it, cocoa butter, and lavender as well to give it a nice scent. So, yeah, there's a mix of ingredients in it that help target the skin, soften it, and to bring relief as well.
That sounds so good. I can't wait to try that. You have absolutely no idea. I just feel better hearing you talk about the ingredients
Awesome.
because
I'm
I
so
don't think it's
excited.
yeah, I don't think it's easy to find the right kind of bath and body products that are natural and that actually work and that don't make me more sensitive.
Yeah, I know.
Because my skin is just sensitive. Like it doesn't like to be bothered by anything. So I can't wait to give that a try.
I'm the same way. And a lot of eczema products on the market actually contain a lot of harsh preservatives and ingredients in them. So my goal was to make make it different where it's more natural and it's safe to use as well.
Okay, let's end off with one thing. Eczema's been around forever. And I correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like there's more and more people suffering from it
Yeah,
today than
I
ever,
feel like
right?
that too.
What do you think we can expect in the next 5 to 10 years with skin conditions like this? Because obviously it's an overall health related issue, but what do you see happening, Abby? Like, are people going to be freed of this kind of condition? What kind of breakthroughs can we expect? What do you see for the future of eczema solutions?
We know that year over year, there's a growing prevalence and a growing number of people who are going through it. And even in terms of kids, I know so many kids who are experiencing it now and so many babies. And in the past, it wasn't as common, but I feel like now there are so many people. I also feel like it really depends which route people take, because if it's going to continue to be just the conventional route, and yes, definitely conventional medication has a time and purpose, but I feel like in terms of long term solutions, if that's just the long term strategy, I feel like it's not going to be able to get to the root cause enough. It's going to be tough if that's still the main way. But I know that, pharmaceutical companies are continuing to come out with a lot of different types of drugs to help with that.
Mhm.
But eventually we want to be able to get to the root cause. And I think unless people do seek alternative approaches, it'll be tough to conquer it.
That's right. And that's why we're here. And most everybody I bring on the show, we're talking about these like alternative solutions and trying to become your own advocate and understanding things on a deeper level as an individual and yourself, because I think that's the best way. I believe like as soon as I just started understanding how everything in the body is connected and your diet and your overall health, I just started to become so much more conscious of everything that I do because I understand how one little thing can have a major, effect on my body, whether it's just eating a little bit of like the wrong and, bad kind of sugars and how that can cause this inflammation within my body. And I'm like, well, I know what that's going to happen. And it's going to wreak havoc on this, and this. And so it makes me make better decisions. And I'm grateful for all the knowledge and even all my guests that come on the show. Like I've learned so much doing all these interviews. It's incredible and so grateful for people like you that are focusing on the things that you do because we need more platforms like yours that are helping people understand that they can get through things and the correct way to get through things that are going to lead to solutions and not just, like you said, a Band-Aid solution. So, Abby, thank you so much. This was incredible. No doubt you're going to help so many people out today. Your wealth of knowledge. Let everybody know you also have your own show, your own podcast. Tell everyone about your podcast, where they can find you, and all your info.
Sure. So my podcast is called the Eczema Podcast. It was actually the very first podcast specifically for eczema out there. So I've been running it for 6 years now. And you can find me everywhere on social media. I'm at Eczema Conquerors on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, even on my website, eczemaconquerors.com. You can find me there. And I look forward to connecting with you and being able to help you as well.
Okay, before we go, I'm going to show everybody my favorite post. You can hear it. It's freaking hilarious. And anybody that suffers from eczema and has like a partner or friends in their lives who like may have recognized that they're dealing with this, it's the best video ever. I'm gonna like put the volume up so you guys can hear it, and then I'm gonna show everyone on the actual.
To say to someone who is suffering from eczema or topical steroid withdrawal, stop scratching.
I cannot relate any more to that. Like, there's no possible way that like you just nailed it, because it's when it gets uncontrollably itchy, you cannot help it. And people are always like, stop scratching. And it's just like, I would stop scratching if I could stop scratching. Like, I don't want to be scratching my skin. And that's just great. There's really good, funny content on there, but really educational content, you guys. Like, it's an amazing platform. Abby, thank you so much. It was so great to meet you. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you for having this platform. And thank you for sharing that video as well. I'm glad you found it, buddy.